creatine is a fuel source for early in bouts of activity, for high intensity activity. Creatine is a very interesting molecule. Early on, when it was released as a supplement, creatine is not just found in supplement form. It's also found, of course, in foods, in particular red meat. However, the amount of red meat that one would have to eat in order to get the amount of creatine that one would start to see a real performance enhancing effect is just far too high. You'd be ingesting far too much of other things in red meat that you wouldn't want that much of. And for that reason, I and many other people will take creatine daily. We now know there's no need to so-called load creatine in the old days, as it were. So old days, by the way, meaning mid-90s and 2000s, we were all told that we had to load creatine. We had to take high-dose creatine for 4 or 5 days, and then you could back off to a maintenance dose. Now it's very clear you can just take a daily dose of creatine, and that it really doesn't matter when you take that creatine. You could take it post-workout, as many people do. You could take it pre-workout. It really doesn't seem to matter. I happen to take it post-workout just as a matter of habit. But again, you can take it any time of day. Now, the point I want to make about creatine is one that's a bit different than the other discussions out there. I have no issue with the majority of what's discussed about creatine out there. For instance, that creatine monohydrate is the most effective form. Fortunately, creatine monohydrate is also the least expensive form of creatine that's sold out there. I see no evidence whatsoever that the other forms of creatine are superior to creatine monohydrate. But what you'll usually hear is that taking 5 grams of creatine monohydrate per day is ideal for everybody. And that advice is simply not well informed by the scientific literature. If you are a larger person, so for instance, I weigh 100 kilograms, so that's about 220 pounds. Well, it turns out if you look at the literature on creatine and athletic performance, and if you look at the literature on creatine and cognitive performance, because as some of you already know, creatine is a fuel, or the phosphocreatine system is a fuel system for the brain as well. And if you look at the studies on creatine, they almost always gauge the amount of creatine to give an individual based on their body weight. So you don't have to get really specific about this, but if you weigh, say, 185 pounds to 250 pounds, you can get away with and probably should be taking 10 grams or so of creatine per day, which is what I do. Whereas if you weigh less than that, 5 grams or maybe even 3 grams is sufficient. Now, I discussed this with Dr. Andy Galpin during that series, and one of the things that I've started to do since the closure of that series is to take more creatine per day. So now I'm taking 10, sometimes even as much as 15 grams per day of creatine. Again, this is powdered creatine monohydrate. My stomach tolerates it very well, but frankly, I don't tend to get stomach aches or gastric distress from pretty much anything unless it's, some form of food poisoning, which is exceedingly rare for me. So some people out there find that creatine really disrupts their gut and they need to take it with food, or they really need to slowly increase the amount of creatine that they're taking each day. I find that I can put 10, even 15 grams of creatine into a whey protein shake or into some water with a little bit of lemon juice just to make it taste a little less chalky. Drink that, and I don't have any gastric distress from that. So you'll need to find what works for you. But the point here is, if you're going to take creatine, you don't just want to, quote unquote, take creatine, 1 scoop per day. You really want to adjust the amount of creatine that you're ingesting according to your body weight. If you weigh 185 pounds or so, okay, plus or minus 5 pounds, out to about 250 pounds, 10 to 15 grams of creatine per day is probably more appropriate for you than is 5 grams, meaning it's going to be more effective for enhancing physical performance and perhaps even cognitive performance as well. And if you're somebody who weighs, 180 pounds down to say 130 pounds, 5 grams of creatine per day is probably sufficient. The point here is, if you are taking creatine, again, not everyone has to take creatine. There's no law that says that you have to take creatine. Some people don't like it. I know some people fear it's going to make their hair fall out, but I realize some people steer away from creatine for whatever reason. But if you decide that taking creatine is right for you, adjust the total amount of creatine that you take according to your body weight.